Hello and welcome everyone! So, let's test if the sound finally works. Just tell me if you can hear this. Oh, let's see what the chat is telling me. Sound is working. Perfect. But let's leave this for now. Finally sound. Yeah, I tried it yesterday with the Indie World presentation from Nintendo, and I got my sound to work right after the conference. It was kind of not amazing. So I put down my smartphone over here so I can read your chat. Sony does have a stream, and we'll watch it over Sony's stream. I'm quieter than the video. Okay, I'll make my voice a bit louder. Why do we have two? So, tell me if the sound is now better, or if I'm still too quiet. Where's your face? My face is here, hi! So let's try again with the sound. Sound better now? Music has stopped, okay. Wait, I can test it over my smartphone. Where's your face? My face is here. Okay. Sound will work, definitely. I can promise you that. So let's see if we'll have sound. No, then it's this one. Alright. This is not the right one, so audio 2 is the final one, and we'll make it a bit quieter. Then it should work. Hopefully. 10 minutes. We'll get it to work. So now I'll test the loudness. Let's see if we can still... Wait. Can you still hear me? Hear me? Test, test, test. Wait. Is the sound alright? Let's test, test, test. Can you hear me loud and clear? So many bends. We have music. Just a little loud. Okay. Okay, still a bit quieter. So I think this settings will be fine. So, tell me... Wait. Tell me if these settings are perfect. I think now they should work fine. Otherwise, just tell me once the stream starts and I'll change the loudness of the background sound. So, now we can close it. And I can make it a bit quieter for me. Otherwise, just tell me once the stream starts and I'll change the loudness. I'll turn off my mic every time I vape. Okay, sound is good. Thank you. Perfect. Yeah, thank you for joining, Barry. And everyone else, of course. So many people. So many PlayStation 5 fans. So you still want some music in the background, or is this alright? Just waiting. Wait, why can't I make it bigger? So I guess as soon as it starts, we can make it full screen. But for now, you'll see all the people going crazy in the top right corner in the chat. Yes, I'm going to put it in full screen. You bought cider today? Oh, I love cider. Like apple juice with alcohol. That won't happen, Arcane. I know when this button is up, you can hear me, and if it's down... And I need to tell you something about Arcane. He is very... Yeah, that's what he is. Sorry, I'm watching my own stream right now. Yeah, longest 7 minutes ever. I totally agree. Don't really care about PlayStation, just here for Benny Bunny. Oh, just here for me. Thank you. So tell me, what's your favorite PlayStation game so far? Then I'll tell you mine. Wait, I need to think. I got them all lined up there. I guess mine would be Life is Strange 1. I loved that game. The artistic style and everything about it. You want to hear me vape? Wait. The sound of vaping. Dragon Quest Builders 2, of course. Why am I asking? I still have a few gripes with Dragon Quest Builders 2, but it's in my top 10. Top 10? Top 20? Maybe top 20. I mean, now that Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming out, there will be another game in the top 10. Come on, press conference. So, like 7 more minutes. Then we'll see something. Whoa. Bust a Move 4 on PS1. That was your last PlayStation game. Wait, how old are you? 1985. Alright. What was the last game I played on PlayStation 1? I guess it's Xenogears. It's also one of my favorite on PlayStation 1. I have no idea why they don't re-release it. But yeah, if the PS5 is backwards compatible, I'll definitely play some PS1 games on it. Hopefully the graphics will also be improved when we get backwards compatibility. What game would you like to see announced? I guess we could see a Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 would be great. Or Horizon Zero Dawn 2. I know that they are working on it for PlayStation 5. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know. But maybe we'll also see a new announcement for a new Final Fantasy game. Final Fantasy 16. When the press conference of Square Enix starts, somewhere around the time where E3 should have happened. Oh, Steffi is also back. Yes, now I got sound. Can you make Link's Awakening in Dragon Quest Builders 2? Someone else already did. I saw it on Twitter at some point. I need to find it again, then I can maybe make a little tour and post it on my channel. But right now I'm still working on A Link to the Past. Right now I'm doing the stuff in between the castle and the church, like all the basement stuff. Yes, I'm going to play Animal Crossing. I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully I'll get it tomorrow, maybe, but I can only show it to you on Friday. I don't think another Dragon Quest Builders game will be announced at this thing. And also, unfortunately, Anthony, the team already spoke about their future plans, and right now they are working on another game which is not Dragon Quest Builders 3. So we don't know what game it is. Maybe it's another Builders game, not with the Dragon Quest IP. Well, that would be best case scenario right now. Yeah, well, it seems like it. We're going to see the PS5. Well, the description reads, PS5 lead system architect Mark Cerny provides a deep dive into PS5 system architecture and how it will shape the future of games. Whoa. So, only 3 or 4 more minutes. Ooh. You want ASMR vaping? Wait. So, but that's enough vaping for now. Now I need to drink something. Premiere in 3 minutes. Ooh. Ooh. Would you be interested in playing any other Zelda games? Breath of the Wild 2. I would really, I'm really looking forward to. But I bet we'll see something in the next 2-3 months. Yes, I'm from Germany. Harry Harry. Or Harry Harry. Didn't they say the same about Stadia? What did they say? That Stadia is vaping right now. I'm late. Oh, I'm latte. I'm latte. No. Actually, I'm on time. Phew. could be could be my reaction. So, 2 more. Oh, 60 seconds. 60 seconds. And then I'm going to make it full screen. Oh. What do you think Nintendo is going to release this year? Hopefully, the Star Fox racing adventure they talked about, which is like a mix of F-Zero and Star Fox. And Breath of the Wild 2, of course. But other than that, maybe a new Zelda HD collection. Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker. Oh. A few seconds. Stadia. Yeah, maybe Stadia is down right now, but oh, it's starting soon. Stadia is kind of yeah, it's a flop. But maybe they'll work on it and then it will be better. But well, Stadia is not for me. I always like to have my games physically, so there's no reason for me to go to Stadia. Yeah, Metroid Prime 4, but maybe 2021, because they restarted all the working, all the development on the game. Yeah, the chat is going wild. Oh, it's starting every second now. Let's get this party started. So wait, maybe, although it's starting every second now. Yeah, it's starting. Come on. Oh, 2 more minutes. Alright. So I'm going to make my webcam a bit smaller. Or more in the corner. So you can see more from the presentation. Is the sound alright or is it too loud? Then I'll tune it down a bit more. Have you ever been to the Netherlands? I had my first kiss in the Netherlands, near in Domburg, right next to Vlissingen and Middelburg. Too loud? All right, I'll tune it down a bit. Wait, I'll check it. So test, test, test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, 10 seconds. I hope you can hear everything well.
Hi. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the talk that we had planned for GDC.
Okay.
But we do have some super exciting news about PS5. And who better to bring that to you than the one and only Mark Cerny. Without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Wait, I'll still check the sound if it's alright.
There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals.
I'll make it a bit
PlayStation
louder,
5
wait.
hardware and how they influenced the development.
So the music is a bit louder than the
I
rest.
think you all know, I'm a big believer in console generations. Once every 5 or 6 or 7 years, a console arrives with substantially new capabilities. There's a lot of learning by the game developers, hopefully not too overwhelming, and soon there's games that could never have been created before. Now, it used to be that as a console designer, you'd somehow intuit what would be the best set of capabilities for the new console, and then build it in complete secrecy. For the PlayStation consoles, that period lasted through PlayStation 3, a powerful and groundbreaking console, but also one that caused quite a lot of heartache, as it was initially difficult to develop games for. So, starting with PlayStation 4, we've taken a different approach, roughly centered around 3 principles. The first of these is listening to the developers, which is to say that a lot of what we put into a console derives directly from the needs and aspirations of the game creators. We definitely do have some ideas of our own, but at the core of our philosophy for designing consoles is that game players are here for the fantastic games, which is to say that game creators matter. Anything we can do to make life easier for the game creators or help them realize their dreams, we will do. So, about once every 2 years, I take a tour of the industry. I go to the various developers and publishers, sit down, and discuss how they're doing with the current consoles and what they'd like to see in future consoles. This requires weeks on the road, as reaching the bulk of the game creators involves talking to well over 100 people at something like 24 publishers and developers. And it is incredibly valuable. By the way, the feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD, which we were very happy to put in the hardware, but a lot of problem solving was required. I'll be doing a deep dive on the SSD and surrounding systems later on in this talk. It's also key to make a generational leap while keeping the console sufficiently familiar to game developers. I think about this in terms of balancing evolution and revolution. Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target was a revolution each time with a
Corona beer will kill coronavirus.
Ways, but time for the developers to get up and running got longer with each console. In the past, I've called this time to triangle. Here's what I had for those 3 consoles. To be clear, I'm not talking about time to make a game. Developers will be ambitious, and it may take them 6 years or so to realize their vision. What I'm talking about is that dead time before graphics and other aspects of game development are up and running, and trying to minimize that. On the other hand, if we're trying to reduce that dead time to 0, that means the hardware architecture can't change at all. We're handcuffed. We need to judge for each feature what value it adds and whether it's worth the increase in developer time needed to support it.
A bit louder.
So with PlayStation 4, we were able to strike a pretty good balance between performance and familiarity. We got required learning back to PlayStation 1 levels. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new features
Better now,
and
Steffi?
a familiar programming model. Ultimately, I think we've ended up with something under a month of getting up to speed. That feels like we're striking about the right balance. I'll go into a bit more detail later today about our philosophy with the GPU and the specific feature set that resulted from it. It's also very important for us, as the hardware team, to find new dreams, by which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance, and the amount of RAM.
He's not an entertainer.
The increase in graphics performance over the past 2 decades has been astonishing, but there are other areas in which we can innovate and provide significant value to the game creators, and through them, the player. That's why the SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore, regardless of what came out of the conversations with game developers and publishers. The biggest feature in this category is the custom engine for audio. That's today's final topic.
Yeah, they're talking a bit about the way to the PS5.
And in particular, 3D audio isn't something that came out of the developer meetings. It's much more the case that we had a dream of what might be possible.
So the beginning will be a bit boring.
And then worked out a number of steps we could take to set us up on that path. So here again are the three principles. The
so
first
no talking
being
anymore.
Enabling the desires of developers to drive the hardware design. To me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation. It's a game changer. And it was the #1 ask from developers for PlayStation 5. As in, we know it's probably impossible, but can you put an SSD in it? That was a discussion we were also having internally. It was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible. At the same time, though, in 2015 and 2016, when we were having these conversations, developers were already banging up against the limits of the hard drive, and a lot of developer time was being spent designing around slow load speeds. I want to focus in on just one number here, which is how long it takes to load a gigabyte of data from a hard drive. The difficulty being that hard drives are neither particularly fast nor flexible. If all your data is in one block, which is frankly not very likely, you can load 50 to 100 megabytes a second, depending on where the data is located on the hard drive.
I'm trying to only talk when it's boring.
Loading a gigabyte takes 10 seconds. If you compress your game packages, you can fit more data on the Blu-ray disc and also effectively boost your hard drive read
like all the
speed
time right now.
We support zlib decompression on PlayStation 4 that gets you something like 50% more data on the disk and 50% higher effective read speed. Unfortunately, though, it's highly likely that your data is scattered around in various files on the hard drive, as well as sourced from multiple locations within those files. So lots of seeks are needed at 2 to 50-ish milliseconds each. My rule of thumb is that the hard drive is spending 2/3 of its time seeking, and only 1/3 of its time actually loading data.
Not really an entertainer.
Putting all of that together, a gigabyte is very roughly 20 seconds to load from a hard drive. Now, a gigabyte is not much data. Games are using 5 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on PlayStation 4, so boot times and load times can get pretty grim. Or to put that differently, as a player, you wait for the game to boot, wait for the game to load, wait for the level to reload every time you die, and you wait for what is euphemistically called fast travel. And all of that leads to the dream. What if we could have not just an SSD, but a blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a second from it, what would change? Now, SSDs are completely different from hard drives. They don't
have no loading times.
If you have a 5 gigabyte a second SSD, you can read data from 1,000 different locations in that second, pretty much at speed. As for time to load a gigabyte, this is next gen we're talking about, so memory is bigger. Instead, we should be asking how long to load 2 gigabytes. And the answer is about a quarter of a second. I mean, that's amazing. We're talking 2 orders of magnitude, meaning very roughly 100 times faster.
Are there new memes?
Which means at 5 gigabytes a second for the SSD, the potential is that the game boots in a second. There are no load screens. The game just fades down while loading a half dozen gigabytes and fades back up again. Same for a reload. You're immediately back in the action after you die.
Yeah, but he really looks
like
the guy from Wayne's World.
As game creators, we go from trying to distract the player from how long fast travel is taking, Spider-Man
yeah, he's selling us an insurance. Very interesting.
Slow that transition down. Pretty cool, right? But for me, this is not the primary reason to change from a hard drive to an SSD. The primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom. Or to put that differently, with a hard drive, the 20 seconds that it takes to load a gigabyte can sabotage the game.
He's kind of the woman in Incredibles,
almost all of us in the room
which said, no capes, but as a man.
Say we're making an adventure game, and we have 2 rich environments where we each want enough textures and models to fill memory, which you can do as long as you have a long staircase or elevator ride or a windy corridor where you can ditch the old assets and then take 30 seconds or so to load the new assets. Having a 30-second elevator ride is a little extreme. More realistically, we'd probably chop the world into a number of smaller pieces and then do some calculations with sight lines and run speeds like we did for Haven City when we were making Jak 2. The game is 20 years old, but not much has changed since then. All those twisty passages are there for a reason. There's a whole subset of level design dedicated to this sort of work, but still, it's a giant distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. So when I talked about the dream of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 GB second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD
That's a good
is so
idea.
fast
Crit it on
as
M.
the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second. If you figure that it takes half a second to turn, that's 4 GB of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right for next gen. Anyway, back to the hard drive.
So everything he's talking about right now also applies to the new Xbox.
For example, we might group all the data together for each city block. That removes most of the seeks, and the streaming gets faster. But there's a downside too, which is that frequently used data is included in many chunks and therefore is on the hard drive many, many times. Marvel's Spider-Man uses this strategy, and though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication as a result. Some of the objects like mailboxes or news racks are on the hard drive 400 times. What I'm describing here are things that cramp a creative director's style. Either level design gets a little bit boring in places, or the data is duplicated so many times that it no longer fits on the Blu-ray disc. And you end up with hard limits on the player's run speed or driving speed. The player can't go faster than the load speed from the hard drive. And finally, I'm sure many of you have noticed that after a patch download, the PlayStation 4 will sometimes take a long time to install the patch. That's because when just part of a file has been changed, the new data can be downloaded pretty quickly. But before the game boots up, a brand new file has to be constructed that includes the changed portion. Otherwise, every change would add a seek or two. Even so, you can occasionally see this happening on game titles. They start to hitch once they get patched enough. With an SSD, though, no seeks, so no need to make brand new files with the changes incorporated into them, which means no installs as you know them today. There's yet one more benefit, which is that system
Sony
memory
ASMR.
On PlayStation 4, game data on the hard drive feels very distant and difficult to use. By the time you realize you need a piece of data, it's much too late to go out and load it. So system memory has to contain all of the data that could be used in the next 30 seconds or so of gameplay. That means a lot of the 8 GB of system memory is idle. It's just waiting there to be potentially used. On PlayStation 5, though, the SSD is
so maybe that's really a press conference from GDC
it's fast enough that when you realize you need a piece of data,
that they wanted
you
to
can
do there.
load it from the SSD and use it. There's no need to have lots of data potentially be used. A different way of saying that is that most of RAM is working on the game's behalf. This is one of the reasons that 16 GB of GDDR6 feels right for PlayStation 5. The presence of the SSD reduces the need for a massive intergenerational increase.
I would love to know if other streamers are already falling asleep right now.
Boot the game in a second.
Can someone go take a look?
No load screens.
If others are sleeping?
Design freedom, meaning no twisty passages or long
Yeah, smoking kills.
More game on the disc and more game on
I
the
know.
SSD.
That's why I'm
Those
vaping.
patch installs go away. The reality, though, is that the SSD
Living
is just
also
one
leads
piece
to
of the
death.
puzzle. There's a lot of places where bottlenecks can occur in between the SSD and the game code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an SSD with 10 times the speed of a standard hard drive, I probably see only double the load speed, if that. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100
You're
times
saying
faster.
everything
So
I was saying. Perfect.
every single bottleneck needed to be addressed. And there are a lot of them. Let's look at check-in and what happens when its overhead gets 100 times larger. Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process.
Yeah, let's talk
Data
about
is
the RAM
loaded into
and
system memory from the hard drive or SSD. It's
and how
examined,
fast
a
everything
few
loads.
values are tweaked
Don't
to
show
the
us
check-in,
games
and then it's
as an
moved to
example.
the final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Look at him, how hyped he is.
Larger, that will cripple the frame rate as soon as the player moves.
Everyone else is like...
of data starts coming off the SSD. So to solve all of that, we built a lot of custom hardware, namely a custom flash controller and a number of custom units in our main chip. The flash controller in the SSD was designed for smooth and bottleneck-free operation, but also with games in mind. For example,
Vaping is more healthy than smoking. You can see someone filtering the smoke from a cigarette and from a vaping machine. A vaping machine? I don't know.
Gigabytes of textures. And while those textures are being loaded, an enemy is shot and has to speak a few dying words. Having multiple priority levels lets the audio for those.
You know the stream is good when people are talking about vaping instead of PS5.
The actual flash die supply the storage. To reach our bandwidth target of 5 gigabytes a second, we ended up with a 12-channel interface. 8 channels wouldn't.
Oh, we're talking about custom flash controllers now.
What we've achieved is actually 5.5 gigabytes a second. With a 12-channel interface, the most natural size that emerges for an SSD.
Let's talk about the RAM bandwidth and something.
The key question for us was, is that enough? I mean, it's tempting to add more, but flash certainly doesn't come cheap, and we have a responsibility to our gaming audience to be cost-effective with regards to what we put in the console. Ultimately, we resolved this question by looking at the play patterns of a broad range of gamers. We examined the specific games.
I should have started the stream 30 minutes in, so we can skip all of this.
Properly on the SSD. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or re-downloads would be quite low, and so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. I'll go through the details in a moment.
Stop making yourself the center of
Back
attention.
To the flash controller. On the
Sorry,
other
this
side,
stream is about me. You can leave,
chip,
Caleb.
4 lanes of Gen 4 PCIe. And inside the main custom chip is a pretty hefty unit dedicated to I/O. Before we talk about what that does, let's talk compression for a moment. PlayStation 4 used zlib as its compression format. We decided to use it again on PlayStation 5, but on my 2017 tour of developers, I learned about a new format called Kraken from Rad Game Tools. It's like zlib's smarter cousin. Simple, similar types of algorithms, but about 10% better compression, which is pretty big. 10% more.
Thank you, Snacky Puss.
Blu-ray disc or on the SSD. Kraken had only been out for a year, but it was already becoming a de facto industry standard. Half of the teams I talked to were either using it or getting ready to evaluate it. So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit, one capable of handling over 5 gigabytes of Kraken format input data a second.
Caleb, wait, can we kick Caleb?
Typically becomes 8 or 9 gigabytes, but the unit itself is capable of outputting as much as 22 gigabytes a second if the data happen to compress particularly well. By the way, in terms of performance, that custom decompressor equates to 9 of our Zen 2 cores. That's what it would take to decompress the Kraken stream with a conventional CPU.
So
there's a lot more in the
Caleb
custom
has
IO,
been blocked for 5
including a
minutes.
dedicated DMA controller. The game can direct exactly where it wants to send the data coming off of the SSD. This equates to another Zen 2 core or 2 in terms of its copy performance. Its primary purpose is to remove check-in as a bottleneck.
I'm
There's
drinking
2
water,
dedicated I/O coprocessors
but
and a large RAM
in
pool.
style.
These aren't Zen 2 cores. They're there principally to direct the variety of custom hardware.
This stream is not
around.
sponsored by Sprite.
One of the coprocessors is dedicated to SSD I/O. This lets us bypass traditional file I/O and its bottlenecks when reading from the SSD. The other is responsible for memory mapping, which I know doesn't sound like anything related to the SSD, but a lot of developers map and remap memory as part of file I/O, and this too can become a bottleneck. There are coherency engines to assist the coprocessors. Coherency comes up a lot in places. Probably the biggest coherency issue is stale data in the GPU caches. Flushing all of the GPU caches whenever the SSD is read is an unattractive option. It could really hurt the GPU performance. So
I'm asking
we've
myself,
implemented a gentler way of
who
doing
is
things,
he telling
where
this
the
to?
coherency engine
To himself?
inform the GPU
Because
of
no
the
one
overwritten
else is
addresses,
interested
and custom
in those
scrubbers
things.
in several dozen GPU caches do pinpoint evictions of just those address ranges.
Something
The
happened.
best thing is, as
Something
a game
happened.
developer, when you read from the SSD, you don't need to know any of this. You don't even need to know that your data is compressed. You just indicate what data you'd like to read from your original uncompressed file and where you'd like to put it, and the whole process of loading it happens invisibly to you
decompression.
and at very high speed. Back to the dream. Thanks to all of that surrounding hardware, our 5.5 gigabytes a second really should translate into something like 100 times faster I/O than PS4.
Yeah,
and
you
allow
should
the
talk
dream
about
of
backwards
no load
compatibility.
screens and super fast streaming to become a reality. Having said that, expandability of our SSD is going to be quite important.
No, we'll watch it.
And you may very well want to add storage to
When
it.
I commit to something, I'll want
Now,
to see it to the
kind of
end.
storage you need depends
Everything
on
but
how
the
you're going to
church
use it.
in Dragon Quest
If you
Builders
have
2.
an extensive PlayStation 4 library and you'd like to take advantage of backwards compatibility to play those games on PlayStation 5, then a large external hard drive is ideal. You can leave your games on the hard drive and play them directly from there, thus saving the pricier SSD storage for your PlayStation 5 titles, or you can copy your active PlayStation 4 titles to the SSD. If your purpose in adding more storage is to play PlayStation 5 titles, though, ideally you would add to your SSD storage. We will be supporting certain
So I
M2
bet only
SSDs.
6 more minutes.
These are internal drives that you
Then
can
we'll
get,
get
on the
to
open
the more
market
interesting
and
parts.
install in a bay in the PlayStation 5. As for which ones we support and when, I'll get to that in a moment. They connect through the custom I/O unit, just like our SSD does. So they can take full advantage of the decompression, I/O coprocessors, and all the other features I was talking about. Here's the catch.
You
though.
want this man in
That
Smash?
commercial drive has to be at least as fast as ours.
But who will
Games
pick
that
him?
rely on the speed of our SSD need to work flawlessly with any M2 drive. When I gave the Wired interview last year, I said that the PlayStation 5 SSD was faster than anything available on PC. At the time, commercial M2 drives used PCIe 3.0, and 4 lanes of that cap out at 3.5 gigabytes a second. In other words, no PCIe 3.0 drive can hit the required spec. M2 drives with PCIe 4.0 are now out in the market. We're
Double
getting our
as much.
samples and seeing 4 or 5 gigabytes a second from them. By year's end, I expect there will be drives.
Those heads are cardboard
and support
cutouts.
7
That was the first thing I
We
was
are
thinking
comparing
when seeing
apples
this.
and oranges, though, because that commercial M2 drive will have its own architecture, its own flash controller, and so on. For example, the NVMe
Well, it should be about
specification lays out the
PS5,
priority
but
scheme for
he's
requests
talking
that
about
the M2 drives
PS4
can
more
use.
than
And that
PS5.
scheme is pretty nice, but it only has 2 true priority levels. Our drive supports 6. We can hook up a drive with only 2 priority levels, definitely, but our custom I/O unit has to arbitrate the extra priorities rather than the M2 drive's flash controller. And so the M2 drive needs a little extra speed
Caleb.
to take care of issues.
Maybe in
arising from
3
the
minutes
flash.
when he's unmuted.
That commercial drive also needs to physically
return
fit
of
inside the
Caleb.
created drive. Unlike internal hard drives, there's unfortunately no standard for the height of an M2 drive. And some M2 drives have giant heat sinks. In fact, some of them even have their own fans. Right now, we're getting M2 drive samples and benchmarking them in various ways. When games hit beta as they get ready for the PlayStation 5 launch at year end, we'll also be doing some compatibility testing to make sure that the architecture of particular M2 drives isn't too foreign for the games to handle. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit and which drive samples have benchmarked appropriately high in our testing. It would be great if that happened by launch, but it's likely to be a bit past it. So please hold off on getting that M2 drive.
Are you not entertained?
Back to our balancing evolution and
Oh,
revolution
we're
of
at the second point now.
This was definitely a recurring theme with the GPU.
Oh.
We need new GPU features and capabilities. If we only have more performance, it's not really a new generation of consoles. Of course, many of these capabilities result in more performance. That's part of why a PlayStation 5 teraflop is more powerful than a PlayStation 4 teraflop. But we aren't just looking for the
Yeah, watching
performance,
grass
we
grow
also
is
need the ability
is
to
very
do
interesting
something with the
compared to
GPU
this
that
in
could
Dragon
not
Quest
have
Builders
been
2.
done before. And we need higher performance per watt. Every time we double the performance of some GPU component, we don't want to find out we've doubled the power consumed and the heat produced. But at the same time, we have
Wait,
to
do I
make
have
sure
stuff
the
to
GPU
show
can
you
run PS4
to make
games,
this more
and
interesting?
we have to
Ah,
ensure
wait,
that
I
the
have something.
architecture is easy for the developers to adopt. Now, backwards compatibility was handled masterfully by AMD. They treated it as a key need throughout the design process. As our solution to adding new features without blindsiding developers, we made sure that if there were new significant features, it would be optional to use them. The GPU supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game. The GPU supports primitive shaders, but you can release your first game on PlayStation 5 without making any use of them. Before I get into the capabilities of the GPU,
Wait, I make
I'd
my
like to make clear
webcam
two
a
points
bit
that can
bigger.
be quite confusing. First, we have a custom AMD GPU based on their RDNA 2 technology.
So,
What
I
does that
printed
mean?
a few furniture
AMD is
pieces for
continuously
Dragon Quest
improving
Builders
their
2.
tech. For RDNA
So
2,
here,
their
like the
goals
couch,
were, roughly speaking,
like
to
2 parts
reduce
combined.
power consumption by re-architecting the GPU to put data close to where it's needed.
And now in
to
brown,
optimize the GPU for
casket,
performance, and to add a
yeah,
new,
the
more
barrel where you
advanced
can
feature set.
get some of the
But
good
that
stuff.
feature set is malleable, which is to say that we have our own needs for PlayStation, and that can factor into what the AMD roadmap
One of the
becomes.
tables.
So collaboration is born. If we bring concepts to AMD that are felt to be widely useful, then they can be adopted into RDNA 2 and used broadly, including in PC GPUs.
One of the
If
stools.
the
The
ideas
first
are
one,
sufficiently
the
specific to what
rustic
we're
looking
trying to
one,
accomplish, like the
like a
GPU
tree stump.
cache scrubbers I was talking about, then they end up being just
Another stool.
if you see a similar discrete GPU available as a PC card at roughly the same time as we release our console, that means our collaboration with AMD succeeds.
I live alone, Donnie.
Introducing technology useful in
Here,
both
another
worlds.
table from
It
Dragon
doesn't
Quest
mean
Builders
that
1.
we as Sony simply incorporated the PC part into our console. This continuous improvement in AMD
And,
technology means it's dangerous to rely
first,
on teraflops as
this
an
drawer,
absolute indicator of performance.
where you can also
and
pull out
CPU count
the
should be
drawer.
avoided as well. In the case of CPUs, we all
Very,
understand
very
that
interesting.
PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5
Wait, can I
each
get
had
it out
8
again? Oh.
CPUs, but we never think that meant the
And
capability.
the more modern looking one.
It's the same for CUs. For one thing, they've been getting much larger over time. Adding new features means adding lots of transistors.
Yeah.
In fact, the transistor
That's
count for a
what I
PlayStation
was
5
printing
CU
overnight.
is 62% larger than the transistor count for a PlayStation.
Ben Travis? Who's Travis?
Second, the PlayStation 5
I'm the
GPU
monster
is
who likes this
backwards
trash.
compatible with PlayStation 4. What does that mean? One way you can achieve backwards compatibility is to put the previous console's chipset in the new console, like we did with some PlayStation 3s. But that's, of course, extremely expensive.
I'm trying to make a
better way is
dollhouse.
to incorporate
all the
any
stuff.
differences in the previous console's
So you
logic
could also
into
stack
the new
them.
console's custom chips, meaning that even as
Or
the technology evolves,
put the
logic
casket
and
on top.
feature set that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro titles rely on is still available in backwards compatibility modes. One advantage of this strategy is that once backwards compatibility is in the console, it's in. It's not as if a cost down will
Yeah, I'm going to
remove
paint
backwards
those,
compatibility like it did
but
on
first I want to
PlayStation 2.
print everything. Then I'm
Achieving
going
this
to paint.
unification of functionality took years of efforts by AMD, as any roadmap advancement creates a potential divergence in logic. Running PS4 and PS4 titles at boosted
A
frequencies
German
has
tongue
also added
twister.
complexity. The boost is truly
Fischers
limited
Fritze,
to
Fisch,
turnaround, and
frische
some
Fische,
game
frische
code
Fische,
just can't
Fisch,
handle it.
Fischers,
Testing
Fischers
has to be
Fritze.
done on a title-by-title
Almost,
basis.
almost got it.
Results are excellent, though. We recently
Wenn
took
Fliegen
a look
hinter
at the
Fliegen
top
fliegen,
100
fliegen andere
PlayStation
Fliegen
4
hinter
titles
Fliegen
as
fliegen.
ranked
Nee,
by
warte.
Playtime.
Wenn Fliegen
And we're
hinter Fliegen
expecting
fliegen, fliegen,
almost
fliegen,
all
fliegen
of them
hinterher.
to be playable at launch on PlayStation 4.
If fly flies behind
With
other
regards to new
flies,
features,
they
as I
will
said,
fly
our
behind other
strategy was to
flies.
try to
Something
break
like
new
this.
ground, but at the same time not to require use of the new GPU capabilities. For more than a decade, GPUs have imposed a restriction on game engines. Software handles vertex processing, but for the most part, dedicated hardware is responsible for the triangles and other geometry that the vertices form. That means it's not possible to do even basic optimizations, such as aborting processing of a vertex if all geometry that uses it is off-screen. PlayStation 5 has a new unit called the geometry, which brings handling of triangles.
Yeah, Steffi, they don't want to see, don't want the people to see everything.
Developer, you're free to ignore
They are trying to bore the Microsoft members, so they turn it off before they show it.
You can use this new intelligence in various ways. Simple usage could be performance optimization, such as removing backfaced or off-screen vertices and triangles. More complex usage involves something called primitive shaders, which allow the game to synthesize geometry on the fly as it's being rendered. It's a brand new capability. Using primitive shaders on PlayStation 5 will allow for a broad variety of techniques, including smoothly varying level of detail, addition of procedural detail to close-up objects, and improvements to particle effects and other visual special effects. Another major new feature of our custom RDNA 2-based GPU is ray tracing, using the same strategy as AMD's upcoming PC GPUs. The CUs contain a new specialized unit called the intersection engine, which can calculate the intersection of rays with boxes and triangles. To use the intersection engine, first you build what is called an acceleration structure. It's data in RAM that contains all of your geometry. There's a specific set of formats you can use. They're variations on the same BVH concept. Then, in your shader program, you use a new instruction that asks the intersection engine to check a ray against the BVH. While the intersection engine is processing the requested ray triangle or ray box intersections, the shaders are free to do other work. Having said that, the ray tracing instruction is pretty memory intensive, so it's a good mix with logic-heavy code. There's of course no need to use ray tracing. PS4 graphics engines will run just fine on PlayStation 5, but it presents an opportunity for those interested. I'm thinking it'll take less than 1 million rays a second to have a big impact on audio. That should be enough for audio occlusion and some reverb calculations. With a bit more of the GPU invested in ray tracing, it should be possible to do some very nice global illumination. Having said that, adding ray-traced shadows and reflections to a traditional graphics engine could easily take hundreds of millions of rays a second, and full ray tracing could take billions. How far can we go? I'm starting to get quite bullish. I've already seen a PlayStation 5 title that's successfully using ray tracing-based reflections in complex animated scenes with only modest costs.
My thing is in the way.
Another set of issues for the GPU involved size and frequency. How big do we make the GPU, and what frequency do we run it at? This is a balancing act. The chip has a cost, and there's a cost for whatever we use to supply that chip with power and to cool it. In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why. Here's 2 possible configurations for a GPU roughly of the level of the PlayStation 4 Pro. This is a thought experiment. Don't take these configurations too seriously. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different because teraflops is defined as the computational capability of the vector ALU. That's just one part of the GPU. There are a lot of other units. And those other units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33%. That's just one part of the GPU. There are a lot of other units. And those other units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on. About the only downside is that system
we only need to consider the people that really want to hear him talk.
But the large number of benefits more than counterbalance that. As a friend of mine says, a rising tide lifts all boats. Also, it's easier to fully use 36 CUs in parallel than it is to fully use 48 CUs. When triangles are small, it's much harder to fill all those CUs with
Lord Kettington got it.
So there's a lot to be said for faster, assuming you can handle the resulting power and heat issues, which frankly, we haven't always done the best job at. Part of the reason for that is, historically, our process for setting CPU and GPU frequencies has relied on some heavy-duty guesswork with regards to how much electrical power games will consume and how much heat will be produced as a result inside of the console. Power consumption varies a lot from game to game. When I play God of War on my PS4 Pro, I know the power consumption is high just by the fan noise. But power isn't simply about engine quality. It's about the minutiae of what's being displayed and how. It's counterintuitive, but processing dense geometry typically consumes less power than
If
processing
your
simple
PS4
geometry,
sounds like a jet
which is,
engine,
I suspect, why
you need to remove
Horizon's
the
map
dust
screen
inside.
with its low triangle count
I also
makes
need
my
to do
PS4
that.
Pro heat up so much. Our process on previous consoles has been to try to guess what the maximum power consumption during the entire console lifetime might be, which is to say, the worst case scene in the worst case game, and prepare a cooling solution
Hey,
that
Zelda
we think
Nick.
will be quiet at that power level.
Yeah, we are playing Hangman
If
right
we get
now
it right,
in the chat.
fan noise is minimal. If we get it wrong, the console will be quite loud for the higher power games, and there's even a chance that it might overheat and shut down if we misestimate power too badly. PlayStation 5 is especially challenging because the CPU supports 256-bit native instructions that consume a lot of power. These are great here and there, but presumably only minimally used. Or are they? If we plan for major 256-bit instruction usage, we need to set the CPU clock substantially lower or noticeably increase the size of the power supply and fan. So, after much discussion, we decided to go with a very different direction on PlayStation 5. We built a GPU with 36 CUs. Mind you, RDNA 2 CUs are large. Each has 62% more transistors than the CUs we were using on PlayStation 4. So if we compare transistor counts, 36 RDNA 2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable GPU. Then we went with a variable frequency strategy for PlayStation 5, which is to say we continuously run the GPU and CPU in boost mode. We supply a generous amount of electrical power and then increase the frequency of GPU and CPU until they reach
how
the
far
capability
ahead is
of
the
system's
Hangman?
cooling solution.
Isn't he dead already?
It's a completely different paradigm. Rather than running at constant frequency and letting power vary based on the workload, we run at essentially constant power and let the frequency vary based on the workload. We then tackled the engineering
When we
challenge
talk a
of
bit
cost-effective
longer like
and
this, and we
high-performance
are
cooling
finally at the
solution
point where he
designed
shows
for
some
that
games,
specific power
then
level.
maybe it will
In some
become
ways,
interesting
it becomes
again.
a simpler problem because there are no more unknowns. There's no need to guess what power consumption the worst case game might have. As for the details of the cooling solution, we're saving them for our teardown. I think you'll be quite
Joel
happy with what
Richard,
the engineering team
because I
came up
guessed
with.
it. Then an R
So,
suddenly
how
appears.
fast can we run the GPU and CPU with this strategy? The simplest approach would be to look at the actual temperature of the silicon die and throttle the frequency on that basis. But that won't work. It fails to create a consistent PlayStation 5 experience. It wouldn't do to run a console slower simply because it was in a hot room. So rather than look at the actual temperature of the silicon die, we look at the activities that the GPU and CPU are performing and set the frequencies on that basis, which makes everything deterministic and repeatable. While we're at it, we also use AMD's Smart Shift technology and send
Making
any
a
unused
murderer.
power from the CPU to the GPU.
You wanna know
so it can
how?
squeeze out a few
This
more
how.
pixels. The benefits of this strategy are quite large. Running a GPU at 2 gigahertz was looking like an unreachable target with the old fixed frequency strategy. With this new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip logic operates.
I don't even know if they are going to show the
36
PS5.
CUs at 2.23 gigahertz.
Maybe they are
with
only talking
10.3
about what they did.
teraflops. And we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at or close to that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was causing headaches with the old strategy. But now we can run it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time.
That would be mind blown if this
That
guy
doesn't
was
mean
rendered
all
in
games
real
will be
time
running
on
at
PS5.
2.23 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz. When that worst case game arrives, it will run at a lower clock speed, but not too much lower. To reduce power by 10%, it only takes a couple of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor. All things considered, the change to a variable frequency approach will show significant gains for PlayStation gamers. The final of our 3 principles was about finding new dreams. It's
The final
important
one.
for us as a hardware team to find new ways to expand or deepen gaming, and that's what led us to a focus on 3D audio. As players, we experience the game through the visuals, through audio, and through
Akira,
the
try
feedback we receive from the
PlayStation.
controller, such as rumble
That's
or haptics.
where
Personally,
PlayStation
I feel a
stream
game is
should
just dead
be.
without audio. Visuals are, of course, important, but the impact of audio is huge as well. At the same time, the audio team on a game project has to do a lot with a little. For example, on PlayStation 4, there's fierce competition for the Jaguar CPU cores. Audio typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you consider that the visuals run at 30 or 60 frames a second, but audio processing needs to happen at almost 200 times a second. So, it's been tough going making forward progress on audio with PlayStation 4, particularly when PlayStation 3 was such a beast when it came to audio. The SPUs in Cell were almost a perfect device for audio rendering. Simple pipelined algorithms could really take advantage of asynchronous DMA and frequently reached 100% utilization of the floating point unit. There's unfortunately nothing comparable on PlayStation 4. Probably the most dramatic progress in the PlayStation 4 generation has been with virtual reality. The PSVR hardware has its own audio unit. It supports about 50 pretty decent 3D sound sources. And this provided a hint as to where we could go with audio, as well as some valuable experience. Not to oversimplify, but here were our goals for audio on PlayStation 5. The first goal was great audio for everyone, not just VR users or soundbar owners or headphone users. That meant audio had to be part of the console. It couldn't be a peripheral. The second goal was to support hundreds of sound sources. We didn't want developers to have to pick and choose what sounds would get 3D effects and which wouldn't. We wanted every sound in the game to have dimensionality. And finally, we wanted to really take on the challenges of presence and locality. Now, when we say presence, we mean the feeling that you're actually there. You've entered the matrix. It's not, of course, something we thought we could perfectly achieve, but the idea was that if we stopped using just a rain sound and instead used lots of 3D audio sources for raindrops hitting the ground at all sorts of locations around you, then at some point your brain would take a leap and you'd begin to have this feeling,
have fun, Donnie.
This feeling of real presence inside the virtual world of the game. This has the capacity to affect your appreciation of the game, just like music in a game does. The concept of locality is simpler. It's just your sense of where the audio is coming from, to the right of you, behind you, above you. This can immerse you further in the game, and it can also directly enhance the gameplay. To use Dead Space as an example, I know, old school, you're fighting enemies in fairly dark, spooky locations. Back in the day, if you played the game using the TV speakers, you could tell that there was one last enemy growling and hunting you down, but it was difficult to tell quite where that enemy was. With headphones, you could tell that the enemy was somewhere on the right, which let you deduce, if you couldn't see it, that it must be somewhere behind and to your right. But with 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out. So, how do we know where a sound is coming from in the first place? Well, all those bumps and folds in the ear have a meaning, evolutionarily speaking.
Okay,
based on what direction
I think
the sound is
5
coming from,
to 10
sound
minutes
waves
and
bounce around
we're
inside
done
the
with
ear.
this.
There's some constructive and destructive interference, and the result is a change in volume. The phase of the sound also shifts, depending on what path the sound wave took to reach the ear canal. These volume changes
Yeah, let's take a look at the chat.
different for each direction and also vary depending on the frequency of the sound.
People
Head size
sleeping.
and head shape also impact the sound in a similar
Thumbs
fashion.
down.
The way that the sound changes based on direction and frequency can be encoded in the table as a head-related transfer function, or HRTF. Here's part of one. The vertical axis is the frequency. The horizontal axis is the direction, front, back, left, right, and the color gives the degree of attenuation
Many
of the
Zs.
sound. The HRTF is as unique to an individual as a fingerprint is. In fact, you're looking at mine right now. Here's how we measure an HRTF. We've taken hundreds of people through this process. We put a microphone in the subject's left and right ear canals, and then sit the subject down in the middle of an array of 22 speakers. We then play an audio sweep from each speaker as we rotate the subject. In the course of 10 or 20 minutes, we're able to
I
sample
mean,
the
doesn't Sony
HRTF
know that
at
we
over
want to see the
1,000
PlayStation 5 and not listen to
Using
this?
HRTF when rendering audio creates unparalleled quality, but it's computationally expensive. The simplest way to use an HRTF is to process a sound source to make it appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 locations we sample. Unfortunately, the processing has to be done in frequency domain rather than time domain, so there's multiple fast Fourier transforms needed for every sound source for every audio tick. That's a lot of multiplies. This computational complexity was the determining factor for our strategy. It meant we had to bite the bullet and design and build a custom hardware unit for 3D audio. Collectively, we're referring to the hardware unit and the proprietary algorithms we run on it as Tempest 3D Audio Tech. The meaning of 3D audio and technology should be pretty obvious here. As for Tempest, I feel it really reflects our goals with audio. It suggests a certain intensity of experience and also hints at your presence within it. We're calling the hardware unit that we built the Tempest engine. It's based on AMD's GPU technology. We modified a compute unit in such a way as to make it very close to the SPU
Caleb and Akira will be
when I
now
said
in
that
the
they were
PlayStation
ideal
chat.
for audio? So the Tempest engine
Wait, should we
has
write
no
them?
caches,
Wait.
just like an SPU. All data access is via DMA, just like an SPU. Our target was that it would have more power than a CPU, thanks to the parallelism that a GPU can achieve, and that it would be more efficient than our GPU, thanks to the SPU-like architecture. The goal being to make possible near 100% utilization of the CU's vector units. Where we ended up is a unit with roughly the same SIMD power and bandwidth as all 8 Jaguar cores in the PlayStation 4.
There's no reason
If we were
to
use
write
the
in
same
a chat
algorithms as
like this.
PSVR, that's enough for something like 5,000 sound sources. But of course, we want to use more complex algorithms, and we don't need anything like that number of sounds. It would have been wonderful if a simpler strategy, such as using Dolby Atmos peripherals, could have achieved our
PlayStation
goals, but we wanted 3D audio for all, not just those with licensed soundbars or the like. Also, we wanted many hundreds of sound sources, not just the 32 that Atmos supports. And finally, we wanted to be able to throw an overwhelming amount of processing power at the problem, and it wasn't clear what any peripheral might have inside of it. In fact, with the Tempest,
something else I haven't shown
got enough power
on
that we
stream
can allocate
yet.
some to the games, to the extent that games want
So I
to
made a
use
prototype
convolution
about
reasons
1 year
and
ago
other algorithms that are either computationally
for this.
expensive or need high bandwidth. But the primary purpose of the
So you can
Tempest
build your
engine
own
remains
houses
3D audio.
outside of Dragon Quest builders.
3D audio is a major academic
still-
research topic.
Whoa,
It's safe to
and it's
say
falling
that
apart.
no one in the world has all of the answers. And the set of algorithms that has to be invented, tuned, or implemented to realize
like
our
this.
vision for 3D audio is immense. For example, use of HRTFs in games is quite complex. Before, I talked about making a sound source appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 HRTF sample locations. But for high-quality 3D game audio, we have to handle other possibilities. The sound source might not be at one of the 1,000 HRTF sample locations, so we have to blend the HRTF data from the closest locations that we have sampled. The sound source might be moving, which needs very special handling as that blend keeps changing, and that can cause phase artifacts in the resulting audio. Or the sound source might have a size to it, meaning it should feel as if it's coming from an area rather than a single point. There's also whole categories of approaches to be handled. 3D audio can be implemented using individual processing of 3D sound sources. But alternatively, ambisonics can be used
No!
for 3D audio.
No!
Ambisonics being somewhat like the spherical harmonics used in computer graphics. And finally, there's audio devices. The player might be using headphones.
I haven't
TV
released
speakers,
that
or
yet.
Have a
It's
higher
just a prototype.
set up with 6 or
Not
more
very
speakers,
stable.
all of which need different approaches. That's a lot of variations. It's nice to have the computational resources of the Tempest engine, but it's clear that achieving our ultimate goals with 3D audio is going to be a multi-year, step-by-step process. Having said that, headphone audio implementation is
you can put
largely
everything
complete
back
at this
together,
point.
and then
It
you
was a
got your
natural place
wall
for us to
back
start.
up.
With headphones, we control exactly what each ear hears, and therefore the algorithmic development and implementation are more straightforward. For TV speakers and stereo speakers, we're in the process of implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the sound can be made to feel as
Who's
if it
looking
comes from
forward
any
to
direction,
Animal
even
Crossing?
behind you. Virtual
bought
surround sound has a
the
lot
Wii
in
U
common
set
with 3D audio on headphones,
a
but
few weeks
it's more
ago, so I have a
complex
few
because
cards with
the
Amiibo
left ear
support.
can hear the right speaker and vice versa. We have a basic implementation of virtual surround sound up and running. We're now looking at increasing the size of that sweet spot, which is to say, making the area you need to be in to feel the 3D effect larger.
Is the word
and we're also working
boring?
to boost the sense of locality. Headphone audio is
So
the current gold standard for 3D audio.
I
on
need
PlayStation
hype, show
5,
the
but we're
product.
going to see what we can do
Corona
to bring
party.
virtual surround sound to a similar level, after which we'll start in on setups with more speakers, such as 6
I don't see no
surround
report
sound.
with
It's now
Reptilian
at the
and
point where some of the PlayStation 5
PS5.
games in development are extensively using these systems. One of the game demos allows you to toggle
Boring.
between conventional PlayStation 4 style stereo audio and our new 3D audio.
I think
I listened
Sony
with
doesn't
just
know
an
its target
ordinary pair
audience.
of over-the-ear headphones, and wow, I could feel a difference.
Like
3D
gamers
audio has that
between
dimensional feel
20
to it.
and
Conventional stereo audio feels
40?
smashed flat by comparison.
it's more
The
like for
improvement
50,
is
60-year-olds.
So, a big advancement, but have I entered the matrix? Does my brain believe I'm really there? Like I was talking about earlier when I explained our target of presence. Well, the answer is no, but you've probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine, it was the default HRTF. The audio team analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt was the closest fit to the total game playing audience. This shows a piece of the default HRTF on the left and my HRTF on the right. You can see that the general features are much the same, but the details are quite different.
This reminds me of me in
With
the
the
school.
default HRTF, as I said, the
When
3D
I
audio
was still
sounds
going to
pretty great.
school.
When I used
Everything was
my
boring, I was
HRTF,
like,
though, the audio reaches a higher level of realism, which is to say that when using headphones and my HRTF, I occasionally get fooled and even think a sound is coming from the real world when it's actually coming from the game. A corollary to this is that there are a few people whose HRTFs are sufficiently far from the default HRTF, that's the red dot here, that they can toggle between PS4 style and PS5 style audio and not sense much difference. I've had a few people describe the PlayStation 5's 3D audio as sounding like a bit better stereo audio. Presumably they're the ones at the very edges of this diagram. Which means what HRTF you're using is key. I'd like everyone to be able to experience what I'm experiencing, but obviously it's not possible to measure the HRTF of every PlayStation user. That means HRTF selection and synthesis are going to be big topics going forward as the Tempest technology matures. At PlayStation 5 launch, we'll be offering a choice of 5 HRTFs. There's a simple test where you pick the one that gives you the best locality. That's just the first step.
Are you
though.
maybe
This is an
interested in
open-ended
fan mail?
research
I got
topic.
some of
Maybe you'll be sending us
Barry
a photo of your
the
ear,
other
and
day,
we'll choose
and
a
I could
neural
show it to
network
you.
Pick the closest HRTF in our library. Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your head, and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize the HRTF. Maybe you'll play an audio game to tune your HRTF. We'll be subtly changing it as you play and home in on the HRTF that gives you the highest score, meaning that it matches you the best. This is a journey we'll all be taking together over the next few years. Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience that next level.
Well, April 1st is still a few days off.
Hopefully, I've been able to illustrate a bit about our design and decision-making process today and why PlayStation 5 has the feature set that it does. Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set. I'm hoping for the complete...
Now comes the fun part.
Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the capabilities of the SSD, or something else? I guess we'll find out.
Yes,
soon.
I'm going to make Animal Crossing videos.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah. No thanks to you. Now comes the fun part. Wait. What the? What the? Yeah, that was interesting. That was it. Unlike. Whoop. Let's see the dislike ratio of this video. Now comes the fun part. And he leaves and the stream ends. Wait, I'll get the stuff Barry sent to me, his fan mail. Will be a bit more interesting than this. Yeah. Oh wait, still I need some the card. So, I hope you're still there. Yeah, Barry, one of my biggest fans, sent me something through. He's living in Scotland and sent me a few games and a few merchandise things from Alice in Wonderland. So here's like a card he sent to me, and he says, "Hi Ben, I hope that you like the pin. Enjoy the game, Barry." So this is a pin of Cheshire Cat. In Germany it's called the Grinsekatze. And he also sent another package. And there was this one. So Cheshire Cat and Barry. We called him that. And he also sent me 2 games. Wait. And a few stickers. Like Alice in Wonderland themed. And 2 nice games I really was looking forward to. I still haven't played them, but I will. Barry, I will definitely, I promise. So first this. Death Stranding from Kojima Productions. And something that's very fitting to the time right now. A Plague Tale. With the coronavirus going wild. Yeah, thanks again, Barry. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, I hope you liked this stream. What the heck was that? Oh, look at the dislike ratio. Already 40,000 downvoting. Wait, let's reload and let's look at the top comments.
Hi.
Hi. That was a nice stream. I wonder which HRTF I should use. Sony, send earpics, please. What? I'm dying all. I just spent 56 minutes watching a lecture. Yeah, but I hope... Yeah, Barry really is a sweet guy. Is Barry still here? Barry. He fell asleep. I can't argue with that. But yeah, I hope you still had fun with the stream. I hope I made it a bit more interesting than if you would have watched it instead, like only the stream itself. Yeah, and I think that's it. But I'll see you in the next one. Or maybe in 2 days when I'll play Animal Crossing. Hopefully I'll upload a video on this day. But yeah, I'll leave the chat open a bit longer. And I'll see you soon. So have a good day, morning or evening. Until then, bye. Wait, let's make some nice music. Which button was it? Button.